Kay here from Viking and Weaver, and today I'm going to show you how to make heddles and warp a standing inkle loom. So this is the top heddle and this is the bottom heddle, and what the heddles do is they provide tension and a space. So one set of strings will be here and another set of strings will be here, and what you do is you push them up and past the warp through, and then you push them down again and pass the warp through that hole. So to make that hole, we have to make heddles. To do that, what we do is we just tie off the simple granny knot's fine. If you want to find something fancier, you can definitely feel free. So you tie it between the bottom one and the top heddle. And when you have all of the ones that you're using for a particular pattern and you warp it, it will look something like that. And it will hold it. And the best way to get that is to go between the top and the bottom, because what you want is for it to be about halfway up. And I think today I'm going to make about 20 of these. That should be enough to do my starting band, which will just be a very simple, solid band that I'm going to make for video purposes, and so that I know how long it takes me to make one for our Etsy store. Of course, when we sell them, they'll be available in multiple colors. So what I'm doing is just tying them off, cutting them off, and then going to the next one, because that's just the easiest way to do it. It's not rocket science, thank goodness. I dropped my scissors, and I'm just pushing them back because since my loom is made out of wood, too many of them towards the front will start to deform the space, and it'll make them shorter than what I want, and I want them all to be the same size. Now when you're making these, what you want to do is use a string that'll last for a while. I'm using a cotton rug warp that I also use for weaving. And you want to pick a color that's not going to rub off. Like, I was thinking about doing this in black, but if they decide to rub off on the colors, it's going to make them dull and dirty looking. And that's not something you want in a finished project. Whether you're selling it or you're sending it into a competition, whether it's through the SCA, which is the Society for Creative Anachronism, or a county fair, you want your finished project to look the best that it can. So I picked a color that would show up good on camera, and that I've used before for this, that I know is not going to just rub off. You also want to make sure that whatever you're using is well dyed. And see, that's 6, and I'm just gonna keep going. Okay, we're going to take a little math break. It's easy math. It is just addition and multiplication, and as long as you have a calculator, you will be completely able to do this, I promise. So we're going to look at this warp equation really quickly. You start with your optimal length, then you're going to add your woven beginning and end for your base woven length. Then you add a 20% take up, the beginning fringe, the end fringe, you add some extra for waist, and that will give you your total warp length. Don't worry, I'm going to go over all of this in detail. So, your optimal length is going to be the length of the product that you want. Like anything extra would be gravy, but you don't want less than the set amount. And the reason this is your warp is a static amount on an Inkle loom. So, with your optimal length in mind, you're going to want to keep everything in inches. It is just easier and less messy, unless you really love decimals, in which case you can go for feet. That's completely okay. You're going to add your woven beginning and end. So just how much extra you anticipate having at the beginning and end. Usually it's used for starting your project, so the beginning won't be quite as pretty, the end won't be quite as pretty. And that's going to give you your base woven length. So for my project, which is a solid white band that I'm making on my Inkle loom, I want it to be 6 feet long. So I converted 6 feet into inches, which is 72. I added 2 inches at the beginning and end for the messy bit of weaving that might not look perfect. So I took 72 plus those 4 inches, and that gave me 76 inches, which is my base woven length. Next, we're going to take that base woven length, multiply that by 0.2, and then we will take those two numbers, and that will be our length before fringe. Now when you multiply by 0.2, you want to round to the nearest whole number. Now what I mean by that is you want to round up. So when I took 76 and multiplied it by 0.2, I came out with 15.2. Now I could round down, but in weaving you always want to overestimate. Having extra is always good. Having less than you intended is not good. So I rounded it up to 16, and now I have added those two numbers, and they are 92 inches before the fringe. Next, you want to take your length before the fringe and add how much fringe you would like to have at the beginning, and then determine how much you would like at the end, and then add some wiggle room for waist, and that will give you your total warp length. So what I had was 92. I added 6 inches for fringe at the beginning, 18 at the end. So I took 6 inches on both ends and added an extra foot because yarn is cheap. Having to completely redo something because it is too small for what you wanted can be expensive. So that gave me a total warp length of 116 inches, which is what I'm going to warp on my loom. So one more time to go over my calculations. My optimal product is going to be 72 inches in length. I added 4 inches for any shoddy weaving at the beginning or end, which gave me 76. I took that number, multiplied it by 0.2, which gave me 15.2, and I rounded that up to the next whole number, which was 16 inches. So I added 76 and 16 together. That gave me 92 inches. I added 6 inches for my beginning fringe, 18 inches for the end plus some waist, and that gave me 116 inches to work with. We'll compare my calculations with what comes off of my loom. Okay, so I have all 20 of my heddles made. I have where I want my yarn to be placed on my loom set, and I want to show you how I came up with that. Now, you saw how I came up with my calculations, and how I measure on something this large is I use a quilter's tape measure. It goes up to 8 yards. It's double-sided, and I measured this way all the way around, and it came up with about 116. And maybe a bit bigger or a bit smaller, but that's all taken care of in the calculations. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get her all worked up. So we start with a heddled row, and you run over this, and then what you want is you want to bring this over, down and around, and then I'm going to do its mate, which is this one, and I'm going to go ahead and run it, and then I'm going to go ahead and push them all the way to the back and get that cord stuck, but that's okay. Just move it out of the way. Since there are only 2 here, it's not that hard. I have my yarn anchored to my front post with a mooring knot so that I can release it when I'm done. So this is my second one. I'm going to use all of these, so I don't really need to count. And I'm just going to go ahead and go around. And you just continue in this fashion for a continuous loop until you have them all strung up. And this is possible for a solid colored warp like I'm doing here. On a multicolored warp, I know some people who can do it, but I'm not quite that skilled at it. So I'm just going to do it in a solid color, and since it's just a test, it'll be okay. It's just to see how long it takes me to go ahead and do a solid colored one for our store, in case somebody should ask. 11A. Guess we're doing 19 because that one came undone. And that one came undone. So we're going to do 18. This is the last one. It bookmarks the end of it for us. I need my scissors so that I can go ahead and cut this off. And let's find my mooring knot, which I should just be able to pull and release, although maybe not. Maybe it won't. Come on. There we go. Wunderbar. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to tie a surgical knot, which is like a granny knot with an extra twist in it. Just make sure that we stay nice and tight, because we want everything to be tensioned the same. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move everything towards the center of my loom. Again, not rocket science, just roughly center. You don't have to get out a tape measure. Worry about it. It just makes it easier, especially since she's wood. And then I'm going to tighten my tension using the bar in the front of my loom. Okay, so now that she is warped all of the way, you can see the top heddle and the bottom heddle right here. And there's a little repair because somebody, a very small somebody in my house apparently cut one of my heddles off, but I fixed it. I just tied on a new string to both ends, tightened it so that it matched the rest. Anyway, so this is your weft, and between sheds, so you'll go, one shed you'll go this way, you'll push it down and pull up the space, and then the next one you will go that way. And then you'll just pull this back up. Do it again, and you will pull all the way down to the bottom and beat your shed, which is a great way to get your frustrations out. And I will be showing you that in the next video. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments for me, please leave them below. Have a great evening.